In the previous video, you must have noticed and observed how Anglo-Saxon was formed. In continuation of the same topic, in continuation of the same series of the classification of history of English literature, I am going to discuss with you the ins and outs of the works of Anglo-Saxon literature. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share it. Let's now come to Anglo-Saxon literature. Literature of the period deals with short and long poems, secondly chronicle works, and third one is translation. As regards poems, there are two types of poems, short poems and long poems. Short poems deal with personal and religious voice, whereas long poems deal with the heroic subject or topic. Well, let's now come to the composer of the short poem. There were two composers, namely Caedmon and Cynewulf. Similarly, the writer of the chronicle is Bede, and the translator of the period is Alfred the Great, who is generally given the credit of starting this genre of translation during this very period. Well, let me here begin with the brief description of short poems. As you already know that there are two poets, namely Caedmon and Cynewulf. Here I am going to begin with the works of Caedmon. His first well-known work is Hymn. This is religious in nature, this is religious in aspect. And the second work, that's Dior's Lament, it's an elegy. As I already shared with you that short poems are personal and religious in voice. So here you can guess and you can watch that Hymn is religious, and similarly the Dior's Lament, as it is an elegy, it deals with the aspect of personal loss, or this is the first poem that deals with the subject of unemployment in the history of English literature. As regards the second writer, second poet of the period is Cynewulf. His well-known works are the Exeter Book, the Vercelli Book, and the third one is the Dream of the Road. The Exeter Book contains two elegies. The first one is the Wanderer and the second one is the Seafarer, and both of the Vercelli Book and the Dream of the Road. These two poems basically deal with the religious aspect. Let's now come to the long poems. There are two long poems which were composed during this period. They are namely Beowulf, and the second one is the Battle of Meldon. The features of these two long poems are, the first feature is that both the works are of epical dimension. Composers of both the works are anonymous. This means we have no trace of the composer or the poet or the poet of the works. The poems deal with the incidents of valor. Here I would like to share with you an important piece of information, and that's that two modern writers, namely Edwin Moir, who is Scottish, and Seamus Heaney, who is a well-known Irish figure, they both are attributed the credit for translating Beowulf into English, and this grand work fetched them several awards. Let's now come to the chronicle or historical work. The writer of historical work is Bede, and thus he is considered to be the historian of Anglo-Saxon period. His well-known works are Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which is historical in nature, which is historical in aspect, and thus it is a historical work. And the second work is Ecclesiastical History of English People. This is a devotional work. And finally, turning to translation, we find that Alfred the Great is the translator of the period. He is generally given the credit of starting this genre of translation, and his well-known work is Cura Pastoralis. It helped people in pursuing the spiritual path. So we have learnt in this video that there were three kinds of works. Number one, poems, basically dealing with the short and long poems, ecclesiastical works or historical works, and translation.